Hey guys, it's your friendly skywriting pilot here. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that I wrote and recorded this video based on what I remembered about this movie from my initial viewing of it a few years ago. After watching it again to make this video, I realized that a lot of the suggestions I had for J.K. Rowling were actually written into the movie, but had been done so poorly I had actually forgotten what was in the movie. I know the name of the series is called It's Good, but this movie is just atrocious on almost every level. So if you hear an idea that J.K. Rowling actually attempted to achieve in the movie, just know that I mean it should be done better. That's it. So put your tray tables in the upright position and enjoy the video.
What has been phenomenally enjoyable has also been what's the biggest challenge, which is that in contrast to the first movie, which was a relatively straightforward narrative, although a lot was hidden, this is a complex story.
Oof. Guys, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, well, it's not good. Its pace is all off, it ruins characters, and it breaks the rules of its own world pretty heavily. It is by far the biggest misstep in the franchise, which is a shame because I really like the world of Harry Potter. I've waited until midnight at Barnes & Noble to get the latest book. I've watched the movies on repeat whenever they came out on DVD. It's a cool world with a lot of really cool characters. But this movie just isn't anywhere near as good as the rest of the franchise. Not to mention that J.K. Rowling has been saying a lot of stuff online that I personally don't agree with in any way, shape, or form. But I'm not really here to talk about any of that. I'm here to talk about this terrible, terrible movie that she wrote. In case you weren't aware, J.K. Rowling has full control over the Harry Potter world, and somehow she convinced the Warner Brothers studio to let her write this movie and the one before it with 3 sequels still to come. And I think it's pretty obvious that she didn't let anyone else look at any of the screenplays. So instead of reviewing the movie like a million other people on YouTube already have, I've decided that for this series, I'm going to tell you what I would do to make the movie better. There are some very obvious mistakes within the movie that could have easily been fixed with a quick pass over of the script, and some not so obvious ones that I think would have made this movie a smash hit instead of just being okay. Also, since I'll be using a lot of footage from the movie, I'm going to alter it like this, or use still images like these. Fair use can only take me so far, you know? So, with no restraint on spoilers, The Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald is good, but at the beginning of the movie, we see Grindelwald being extradited from America over to Europe. The first change I would make to the movie is to have Tina be there during the prisoner transfer scene. See, in the first movie, one of Tina's big motivations is to become a magic cop again, and after helping with the capture of Grindelwald, it wouldn't be too big of a leap to say that they reinstated her, and since she knows Grindelwald pretty well by now, she should help with his transfer. So with Tina in attendance, we now see Grindelwald escape, but with a bit of a twist. Grindelwald now goes out of his way to make sure that none of the wizards transporting him die. And in doing so, he could even take a bit of damage, he could defend himself a little harder, but none of the guards guarding him die. See, at the end of the movie, we as the audience find out that Grindelwald wants to prevent World War II and the Holocaust. But, since he's very obviously the bad guy, It forces us, the audience, to openly root against someone trying to prevent one of the darkest times in human history. You see how that doesn't work? So instead, we need to change Grindwald's motivations slightly. It would make more sense, and it would make him more of a sympathetic character for him to value magical blood above everything else, even at the expense of his own safety. In his eyes, all magical people are precious, and therefore don't deserve to be killed at all, not even by him. But before he goes, Tina manages to snag something out of Grindelwald's pocket. It's a bit of newspaper advertising the Parisian circus. The next scene we have is Newt at the Ministry of Magic. Now this actually makes sense in the movie. He was involved in a massive international incident that jeopardized the existence of wizard kind everywhere. It makes sense that the government would make him check in and make sure he's not smuggling foreign animals across international borders anymore. What doesn't make sense is to then have that same government, who already has soldiers on standby, ask a zookeeper like Newt to help capture one of the most dangerous wizards in history? That doesn't make any kind of sense. While he's waiting in the hallway, though, Newt runs into his older brother, Theseus, and we can have a bit of a character-building moment between the two of them, where Theseus is, "War is inevitable," and all Newt wants to do is save magical creatures. His natural state is that of a pacifist. You can even have them talk about how they both have been like this since childhood, where Newt has always felt like he's living in his older brother's shadow. He could even have a moment with Leta Lestrange where she hints that she and Newt could have had something together had he simply asked her out in the first place. So after that exchange, Theseus and Leta leave, and right as Newt is entering the room to meet with the Ministry officials, he sees someone familiar, Albus Dumbledore. They don't speak, they don't say anything, they just notice each other in passing. Now, here might be my first big controversial change to the movie, but I would take out about 90% of the Dumbledore we have right now. I think he should be little more than a cameo at the beginning of the movie here, and then we don't see him again until the very end of the movie, where Newt meets with him on the Hogwarts Bridge. Cut out the recruitment scene, the teaching scene, and yes, even the Mirror of Erised scene. At this point in time of the movie, and the franchise as a whole, we don't need to know what that heart-shaped charm thing is, or why it's there. Also, since we're talking about cutting things, I would cut the entire flashback sequence with Newt and Leta as kids. Don't get me wrong, the kid playing a younger version of Newt is doing a great job with the part, but this entire sequence was only put here so that we as an audience would feel sad at the end when Leta eventually dies, and it doesn't work. An overly long flashback doesn't make us care about Leta as a character, because we don't see her grow or change or learn about her personal motivations. We meet her here for all of 10 minutes, forget about her for most of the movie, and she dies. Now, I'm going to address that last part later on in the video, but for right now, this whole flashback needs to be taken out. During the meeting with the Ministry officials, Newt asks why Dumbledore was there, and the Ministry official tells him that the only reason Newt isn't in Azkaban right now is because of Dumbledore. This would be a great character moment for Dumbledore, showing that even though Newt isn't a student anymore, he still cares about him. In the movies, as he is, Dumbledore seems really concerned about recruiting Newt for a war, which doesn't make sense because all he does is take care of magical animals. He's not a soldier. So anyway, the Ministry tells Newt that he still has a travel ban on him and that he can't leave the country. Newt pleads his case for the ban to be lifted because there's a Zowu being tortured in the Parisian circus, and Newt wants to go save it. This would be a way better character motivation for Newt to leave the country, rather than for him to go tell his potential love interest that a magazine wrote the wrong Scamander brother's name down when announcing his engagement? God, you needed an editor on this, JK. So obviously the Ministry says no and keeps the travel ban on him, but Newt doesn't care. He's going anyway. We get a quick montage of Newt taking care of his creatures with the cute zookeeper helper here, and right as he's about to leave, who shows up at his door? Queenie and Jacob. Now, I like the fact that Jacob had his memories wiped at the end of the first movie. It really made this scene touching and memorable, and you can really see the pain on both Jacob and Queenie's face that this was going to be the last time they were ever going to see each other. Plus, in the bakery scene, it's obvious that his mind wasn't completely wiped either. I think they should have kept his memory wiped, but have him fall in love with Queenie all over again. That, yes, his memory might be gone, but something deep down is telling Jacob that he loves this mysterious woman who shows up at his bakery. Then once they were in love again, Queenie could tell him about his previous adventures with Newt. So when Jacob does show up on Newt's front door, he wouldn't really know who Newt was, but he could have this strange feeling of deja vu that they were in fact friends. So this next part goes into my biggest criticisms of the movie, and I'm not alone in thinking this either, but a massive misfire this movie makes is that it turns Queenie, sweet, innocent Queenie, into a sex criminal. No, I'm not joking. She brainwashes Jacob with a love spell, then kidnaps him to a foreign country. It is the most blatant character assassination I have ever seen. She's a monster now, and we know she's a monster because the exact same crime is committed by someone else later on in the movie. I think J.K. Rowling was trying to portray Queenie as a woman who just wanted to love a muggle man and was willing to do anything to protect that relationship. But my God, did this not come across. It turns Queenie into a desperate villain, and I hate her now. So my big change for this movie is to not make Queenie a sex criminal anymore, and instead, she and Jacob are just now in love again. That's it. That's all you need from these two. That, and now they're on the run from the Makuza, because Muggle and Wizard marriage isn't allowed in the US, something that Newt even established in the last movie.
Mr. Scamander, do you know anything about the wizarding community in America?
I do know a few things, actually. I know that you have rather backwards laws about relations with non-magic people. That you're not meant to befriend them, that you can't marry them, which seems mildly absurd to me.
Who's gonna marry him?
So with Jacob and Queenie now in the story, Newt continues to make his way to the portkey that's going to smuggle him into France. All three of them leave his house and start walking down a busy London road filled with people. During this scene, however, we see Queenie have one of those episodes where she gets kind of overwhelmed by all the voices in her head. We also see that there's nothing Newt nor Jacob can do to stop it. It's painful and uncomfortable, and all they can do is wait for it to go away on its own. After that, we cut to Grindwald taking over that house in Paris, where he has that muggle baby killed. The only difference I would make with this scene is that I would have it portray Grindelwald's disdain for muggles a bit more. We've already seen that he genuinely cares about the well-being of witches and wizards at this point, and that he'd go out of his way to keep them alive. Now, we need to see the reverse of that. With this scene, we could see just how much he hates muggles, and that for Grindelwald, it is a zero-sum game. He doesn't care how many muggles he has to kill in order for magical kind to end up on top. And at the end of the scene, we see him send someone to the circus because he knows he's going to need Credence as a weapon. Speaking of Credence, we jump on over to the circus where we see that Credence has survived being blown up and is now on the run. We can even have a scene where a phoenix egg hatches near him, and since Credence works at the circus, he's the one that has to take care of it, hinting at his Dumbledore lineage. This would be a bit better than having just a random phoenix show up in an attic somewhere in Paris that he finds. None of this makes sense. Just put the phoenix in the circus. We then also find out that Credence is looking for Kama, who's promised to give him information as to who Credence's real parents are. Also, as a side note, I think Nagini should just be another employee at the circus, not an attraction. People can already shapeshift into animals in this world. Yeah, I know it's a curse and not an ability, but the end result is the same. So while we're at the circus, a show is going on and we see that the Zou is being tortured and coerced into doing tricks for people's amusement. This would fit really well into the anti-animal cruelty message from the first movie, instead of just having an animal just sit in a cage until it's ready to pop out of its box because the movie calls for it. During the show, we see that Kama is waiting for Credence in the audience, and who's sitting just a few rows above him? Tina. Now here's where I would change Tina's character up a little bit. As I said before, in the last movie, Tina's main motivation was to get her magical cop badge back, but I think it would be a better character fit if Tina was more caring and almost motherly to everyone around her. This would even make sense in the logic of the world, since Queenie and Tina's parents were killed by dragonpox. So it would make sense that, as the older sister, Tina had to step up and take care of the both of them. After that, we see Newt, Jacob, and Queenie arrive in France. Newt does his little fairy dust trick to find the circus, and as they walk inside, Jacob looks up into the crowd. He pulls Queenie to the side and points to Tina and says, "Hey, she looks familiar. Do I know her?" Queenie then shouts and waves to her sister in excitement, and for the briefest of moments, everyone stops what they're doing and stares at each other, confused by the sheer coincidence of it all. But before anyone can do anything, Grindwald's subordinate walks in and blows up the circus. Everyone scatters in all directions, and Kama escapes. It's here we start to see our characters start to make some tough decisions. Credence decides to go after Kama. Tina spots Credence in all the chaos, and instead of following Grindelwald's lackey, she chooses to follow him instead, which turns out to be the right choice because in the midst of all the chaos, the Zou then breaks its chains and eats Grindelwald's subordinate. Newt wants to go after Tina, but seeing as how a giant Chinese lion creature just ate someone, he decides to stay and rescue it. He tells Queenie and Jacob to go find Tina, which they try to do, but they lose her in the crowd of people trying to escape. Then, Queenie loses Jacob. Now she's all alone in the streets of Paris, surrounded by strangers, and what happens? She starts to get overwhelmed by the voices in her head. Queenie falls to the ground crying as people make their way around her, when all of a sudden, the voices stop. Confused, Queenie looks up, and who's staring down at her? Well, it's Grindwald, and he's offering her a hand. We then see Credence and Tina follow Kama down into a sewer dungeon, and instead of imprisoning them, Kama just tells them the truth about Credence's family. The reason he tells them this is because he's dying. He's got the little worm thing inside of his eye, and he's been using a steady supply of unicorn blood to keep himself alive. Only now, he's run out of it. Kama tells Credence that a man named Lestrange hypnotized his mother and had a child with her named Lita Lestrange. Kama's mother then dies, and Lestrange gets remarried and has another child, and that child was Credence. Kama was looking for Credence because he thought Credence could lead him to Lestrange, so that Kama could take his revenge on the guy who killed his mother. This change does two things. One, it spreads out all of the confusing information we're given at the end of the movie instead of dumping it on us all at once. And two, it would actually create a twist ending. See, if Credence spends a good portion of the movie thinking he was Lita Lestrange's long-lost brother, only to find out that he's actually a Dumbledore at the end, well, that would be a pretty decent twist. So Kama tells him all this, and with no more unicorn blood to keep him alive, the parasite kills him. And he's just out of the movie now. After that, we cut back to Queenie, who's now in Grindelwald's house. Here is where we could really see just how manipulative Grindelwald can be. He flatters Queenie by telling her that she's incredibly special, even amongst special people like witches and wizards, that she shouldn't be afraid of her gift. Queenie could even try to read Grindelwald's mind, but she doesn't understand his thoughts because Grindelwald isn't from an English-speaking country, so he doesn't think in English. Queenie then tells him that all she wants is to marry Jacob, a muggle. Now at first, we as the audience think that Grindwald is going to get mad at this, but he doesn't. Instead, he uses Queenie's situation to get her on his side because he knows that having a mind reader would be pretty handy. So he says that if he had his way, everyone would be free to live as they want without fear of being persecuted for whom they loved, and Queenie starts to think about a few things. At the very end of the scene, Grindwald mentions that he's going to a rally later that night, and that she ought to come. In the next scene, we see that Newt has finished rounding up not only the Zowu, but the rest of the circus creatures. After that, Jacob finds Newt saying that he lost Queenie in the crowd and he doesn't know what to do. Newt, still thinking that Queenie followed Tina, figures that all they have to do is find one and they'll find the other. At this point, the two of them run into Nagini, who offers to help find Tina because she wants to find Credence. She does this by turning into a snake and following Tina's scent. This would actually give the character something to do other than just be a snake with a famous name like she is now in the movie. There could even be a cute moment for Newt by having him take out a napkin or a handkerchief or something that Tina had given him in the last movie. Nagini then follows Tina's scent to Kama's sewer dungeon, where we see Tina comforting a crying Credence. Credence being crushed to find out that his father was a monster. Newt sees that Kama was drinking unicorn blood and knows that the only way to get unicorn blood in Paris is through a single person, Nicholas Flamel. With no other clues to go off of, they pay a visit to the alchemist. Once they arrive at Flamel's home, Newt gets into a heated debate with him about the ethics of using unicorn blood at all. Newt argues that it puts a target on the creature's back for poachers to then hunt them down. And while Flamel can agree to this, he knows that unicorn blood is the only thing keeping a lot of people alive in the city. During this argument, Flamel mentions that a strange man was making a similar argument the other day. That man? Grindwald. He'd been trying to recruit Flamel and his Philosopher's Stone to join his side. Flamel then tells them that Grindwald is having a rally later that night, and he gives them the address of the graveyard where it's going to be held. Newt, realizing that he's in over his head, reluctantly calls his brother Theseus to join them in Paris and to bring Aurors. Theseus does bring the Aurors, but he also brings Leda. Once everyone meets up at the graveyard, Newt and Theseus have another bickering brotherly fight where Theseus reminds Newt that he has to keep sticking his neck out to save his little brother, and Newt reminds Theseus that all he wants is to save as many magical creatures as he can, and that he doesn't want to be in a war. Remember, Newt is a pacifist. Theseus tells Newt he doesn't have a choice anymore, and that he has to pick a side just like Leda did. At the sound of his sister's name, Credence steps forward and tells her that he's her long-lost half-brother. But and here's where the twist comes in. Leda tells Credence that she killed her brother by switching out the babies on the ship to America.
Corvus Lestrange is already dead. I killed him.
So now Credence is back to square one and doesn't know who he is. He's still looking for answers. After that whole scene, the rally starts and Grindwald begins his big speech. Now, I said earlier that in the actual movie, Grindwald is actively trying to prevent World War II and the Holocaust, and that it makes us, the audience, root against him. The whole thing is supposed to come off as this fascist-esque rally designed to whip the wizarding world of Paris into a panicked and sort of xenophobic frenzy, only it doesn't do any of that. Instead, what Grindwald should be doing is pointing out that Muggles are self-destructive in nature, that they have caused all the wars and suffering in the world, and that if they, wizarding kind, don't rise up to their rightful place and conquer the Muggles, witches and wizards are going to end up as another minority group in the Holocaust. That is what an actual fascist would say at a rally, that an outside group is going to persecute them unless they do something about it first. And who do we see in the crowd eating all of this up? Queenie. At this point, Theseus barges in with his oars and attempts to arrest Grindwald, but he puts up his blue flames of loyalty spell around him, and we start to see witches and wizards walk through the flames or run away. Theseus then does his best to fight Grindwald one-on-one, but remember, Grindwald has the Elder Wand, and Grindwald is winning. Theseus's heroism and bravery that had helped him in the First World War is now failing him, so then Newt steps in with his magical creatures and helps out. Most notably, the Niffler takes the heart-shaped charm out of Grindwald's pocket without him noticing. Theseus gets tossed up into the stands somewhere, and Grindwald goes to make his escape. While this is happening, a confused and desperate Credence starts to walk into the blue flames. Leda tries her best to stop him, saying that she may not be his actual sister, but she's willing to help him find his real family. But Grindwald tells Credence that he's the only one that has the answers he's looking for. And so Credence leaves with Grindwald. At the same time, Jacob is trying to convince Queenie that they should just get out of there. And Queenie starts to go with him, but then she hesitates. She tells Jacob that she loves him, but they can't be together yet. Not with the world as it is, and that Grindwald is fighting for them so that they could one day have a life together. Then she starts to walk backwards and into the blue flames, and with a tear in her eye, she leaves Jacob behind. A stark contrast to the way the couple said goodbye in the last movie. So here is where I would deviate the most from the actual movie. In the movie, Lita Lestrange tries to fight Grindelwald but ends up getting burned to death. I never really liked this because it really makes the entire 15-minute flashback sequence utterly pointless. The only reason J.K. Rowling put this flashback in here is because she wanted us to feel sad when Lita dies. But in a big franchise like this, introducing a character only to have them die in the same movie doesn't move us. We haven't seen her grow as a character. We haven't seen her survive any battles. Newt may have flirted with her a little back in high school, but other than that, we don't ever get to know her. So instead of Lita dying, I think it should have been Tina. If Tina had been killed by Grindelwald, then that would have immediately radicalized Newt to his brother's point of view that war is in fact inevitable. We would see Newt change from his quirky, adorable zookeeper to a hardened and angry soldier. Not to mention that it would have hit us, the audience, way harder. We would have felt Newt's loss with him, and therefore Tina's death would have actually meant something. After that, pretty much everything else would be the same. The brothers team up to save Paris from the giant flaming dragon. Newt finds out that the Niffler stole Grindelwald's protection charm, then goes to Hogwarts to find out what it is. Because remember, we as an audience don't know what this is yet. Then in the final scene of the movie, we can have Grindelwald reveal that Credence is in fact a Dumbledore. And along with the wand that he gives him, the same phoenix from the circus comes flying in through the window and lands on his shoulder. Roll credits. And that's it, guys. That's how I would fix Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Let me know if there's another movie you want me to fix in the future by writing it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.